Sego, Scano, Sewagwego, Gahandagwa, Syungyats. My name is Diane Longboat, and today I send warm and loving greetings to all of you who are joining us for this very special presentation by a good friend and colleague of mine, Brenda Johnson. Brenda is a member of the Mohawk Nation here at Six Nations Grand River Territory. She has had a long career in the community as a respected social worker and community organizer. She's dedicated 30 years of her career to working in mental health, addictions, and suicide interventions. Brenda now works as Director of Services for the Niagara Peninsula Aboriginal Area Management Board. This is an organization that seeks to enhance the quality of life for urban Aboriginal youth through culturally appropriate employment and training supports. Brenda's presentation with us today is titled Our Responsibility to Care for Our Elders During Difficult Times. Brenda will speak about her own experience caring for elders in our community as she has been providing traditional medicines to them throughout the COVID-19 pandemic. Brenda will dedicate her presentation to family members who have passed. She lost 3 elderly language-speaking family members to the pandemic, and she misses greatly the ability to go and visit them, learn from them, and speak with them. Welcome to our dear friend, Brenda Johnson.
What a great way to go back in time in my mind and with my memories. Yeah, for that. I was thinking about how did I know to do what I do as an adult, and it went back to growing up in a time with a lot of elders around, mostly like family, grandmothers, great-grandmothers, aunts, uncles, and then attending ceremonies and being a part of it. And I think that it's observing that and being a part of that, and as a child having those responsibilities that were age appropriate. We could help in our little ways, and a lot of it was observing. And I know that being able to being very fortunate as having those experiences, like living them, it's ingrained. You're born with it, but it's also that lived experience that just strengthens it. I know that when thinking about how did I just do what I did in regards to helping people in my family with going through COVID and experiencing it, was just second nature, I guess, because we always looked after our elders and whatever it is what they needed, and they didn't need much. They needed that compassion, they needed that care, and they needed you. So it's not these great big exciting moments and just these big profound grand gestures. It's the everyday love that you can show them. And I found it to be being in tune to what it is that their needs were. Because for me, growing up with my paternal grandmother and my grandfather, there was hugs. And then fast forwarding to a time when I looked after my aunt, she had gotten sick, so I was finished school and I wanted a break, so I didn't apply for any jobs. And I was fortunate to be able to have that time, that freedom to say, I will help look after her. So she was really, really sick, and it was just the everyday attending to her needs and encouraging her and just loving her in a space and how she was comfortable. She had went to residential school, and she wasn't a hugger. She didn't say it was a hard experience, but in listening to her experiences and thinking about if that was to happen today, it'd be pretty rough. But they were tough and they were resilient and survivors. I know that for me, I just knew I had to do what I could do to keep them safe. And I always would say I'm fully vaccinated, but I still don't play fast and loose with where I go, what I do. Having the time to go and just get the groceries that they needed. And also, when I did start working, it was easier. And my cousins, Glenn and Vera's son, helped with the expenses. So it wasn't something that was a burden. Again, that's that looking after each other and doing our part on what we could do. So he would either go get groceries or I would go get groceries and be able to provide for our families, our elderly family members. But thinking back, when my grandma or my great-grandma Maggie was elderly, My aunts, her children, her grandchildren, all took turns looking after her and making sure that she went to her appointments or got to go to each of their houses, and she was never ever seen or treated as a burden. There was always that love and that care and that compassion. And the one thing that I saw that I added to it, there's a lot of it too when I was growing up, was laughter. So it wasn't just attending to the basic needs, but it was also that emotional, mental, spiritual well-being that was a part of all of that. It wasn't something that was dissected and researched. It was just done. And it was like, where did I learn this? And it was just from living it. And it wasn't something that I saw as, oh, this is a burden to do or anything. It was just something that, being raised that way, that this is what you do. This is how you care. You do your little bit, you do your part, and you do it out of the goodness of your heart. And thinking back to the time that I got to spend with my great-great-grandmother growing up, and she never ever spoke English, but I understood her. I understood Cayuga, and then even like when I fast forward into my life when I spent with my Aunt Vera, she didn't speak the language, but she was learning it. She was learning Mohawk, and having those opportunities of having those talks and saying those words and stuff. It was good, and I really enjoyed those little moments. And I remember there was an interview she did, and she wanted me to be there, so I was sitting there, and she said to the lady, I asked her to be here because she lived very similar to the way she did growing up, with like without running water, without hydro. We had wood stove for heating the house in the winter, a cook stove that ran every day, all year round. And the water, our fridge in the winter time was the well. Your milk and your meat and stuff, eggs, that would all go down into the well in the pail. No, actually in the summertime, that was the well. The well was the fridge. The back porch was the fridge in the wintertime. So like a lot of people my age, they didn't experience that, but I did. And I consider that time was it was a simple life, and we all worked together and we did our part, and it was always having, as children, age appropriate stuff. And I remember one time and like being around fires, like I said earlier about where's the big kettle for boiling the sap, because a fire like that's what we would, a bit bigger, but to boil sap in and make our own, being able to come back in time, in memory, but also spiritually, emotionally, and mentally. Like physically I'm here, but in my body, in my spirit and everything, I'm back in time, and it feels so good. And those are the things, those little moments, that's something that's not, it's beautiful, it's perfect, it's grand, but those are the types of moments that our elders need to experience again, going back in time, or looking at things that they've mementos and stuff, uplifts the mind. And COVID was a physical, it was a pandemic, it was an illness, it was very much a risk for our vulnerable populations and our elders. And a big part of that was their mind, their spirit, and spending that time with them to help them go back in time and spend that time there to help uplift their mind, but also have laughs. Like really having good belly laughs and chuckles. And I remember one morning my aunt's tooth fell out, and I'm all ready to go into the office, but I'm crawling around on the floor looking for her tooth. It was like, we were both laughing about it. And so I'm just like dusting myself off. Here you go. But there's so many, and just those moments of taking care of them and helping uplift them, because not only are they going through a pandemic, but they're living in that hypervigilant state. Am I going to get sick? If I get sick, is this going to be the end for me with this? And I ended up losing 4 elderly family members. I lost 3 aunts and an uncle. Actually, my aunt passed away last year. And then her brother, my uncle, my Aunt Mary, my Uncle Art, and then my Aunt Polly, and then my Aunt Em, all within a 10-day period they were gone. And they consciously made a decision, and it's taken a while, but they made a decision based on their responsibility in regards to being faith keepers at ceremony and attending ceremony. And that was a choice that they made to attend, and they end up passing away all within a 10-day period. And it was hard. It was very complicated, and it was the harder part I found was for family not being able to be together at that time. So again, we used the virtual world of having FaceTime groups to be able to visit that way, to be safe, but to visit. And as a group, there'd be a whole bunch of us all talking and laughing and remembering and stuff. So we had to adapt, and our people, we've always adapted. And being able to get through this, unfortunately losing some of our family members, the hard part I find is not being able to simply just go and call them up or stop by their house and visit with them and talk to them and ask them questions. And yes, sometimes being told, like, you know this, but needing that discussion with them to just strengthen that understanding, make sure that you're thinking right, and being also able on the same side to be able to keep elders in our family safe. You don't need to do that. I will do that for you. You just keep yourself safe. And then also, like I said earlier, just helping to uplift their mind, helping to share that time and that space with them, but also make it pleasant, make it fun. Like we would have, there was so many times, every day we would have a laugh. There's always something that we would have a good time in doing. And I find that the hardest part is with the loss is having to rely on what they taught you, and knowing, and then going through it and knowing, okay, so you were given a lot, you do have a lot. I guess getting used to having to stand on your own when they're gone, that's the hard part, because they, as much as I offered them that comfort, it was reciprocal. It was back and forth, and it fed me and my spirit, and it also it helped in the grieving process. And I think going back to in time of how we lived together, that's how we ended up making transitions in our lives, is because we weren't left alone. And that's the hard part of COVID, is that you basically had to be alone. And if we could have even one person or two people, three people, then you had that semblance of comfort with each other, and that you weren't alone. And that, when I look back, that's the hard part of it. We're not meant to be left alone. We're not meant to be isolated. And they said, oh yeah, well, even virtually is good, but it's not the same. It's not the same. Because I was thinking about that when Cindy and Jackie were playing, and it's like the energy that comes from the drum and their voice, it's the neural aspect of well-being as well. Like, we have science now to help us understand what all this stuff does, but the reality is our ancestors, our people, they've known that since time immemorial, the importance of our songs, our ceremonies, our medicines. I look here and I'm like, these are all my medicines. The strawberries, the green beans, growing this stuff, obtaining this stuff for ceremony, specific, like salmon for the eagle. All these things mean something, and that's why I was looking around and I said, she has everything in here. Like, it's all here, and it's like you're coming into a sacred space and a safe space, spiritually and emotionally, mentally, and physically. Like, this is holistic. This is what holism is all about, is that those little things, the water, the fire, the space, it's a sacred space. Even though it's 2022, we still create, we still have that. It's still here, and it still works. It still provides for us. So I wasn't sure what this would be like, but I was like, I know I'm going to enjoy it. And the opportunities that we can have to be a part of. I always say I'm a consumer of medicines, because I'm not versed in what each one does, but I have elders and helpers, and we weren't expected to know it all and be the end all be all. We're collectively all a part of that. And when we look at how what we needed for COVID, like, that was my go-to, was the medicines, listening to the medicine people and collecting it and getting it all mailed out. They had way off in the city the medicines to help protect them and keep them safe, or help them get through the symptoms of COVID with our traditional medicines. And so being able to, again, provide that and help people with that is helping contribute to their well-being on a holistic level. We can compartmentalize it all, but when you sit back, because really I haven't had time to sit back and think about what I did or how I contributed, but that's what today has been able to do, is help me to reflect and to honor not only the things that I did for other people, but what that reciprocal relationship was. And again, they weren't grand gestures, they were acts of kindness and from the heart, being able to keep them safe and keep them here as much as we could. And yes, we did lose some, but they're still in here. And I can remember them and be with them in moments like this, but also in my dreams, being able to. And then also, even though physically they're not here, the conversations are still there in my mind and my memory. And those are pieces of the comfort in that grieving process, that it wasn't anything that was left. It was something that continues, and it's more of an internal dialogue, an internal experience now. And I just take comfort. I take that comfort, and it helps through this process of grieving, but also that living through a pandemic. Knock on wood that I've been safe all this time, and most of my family has been safe. And just grateful that for the time that I did have with the ones that we lost. And knowing that they're with the Creator, they're with all our family that have gone on. They're an ancestor now, so they're not technically gone when you think of life on all these different realms, like physically, but spiritually, emotionally, mentally, they're still in our hearts. And as time goes on, it won't hurt so much, but it does the heart good to remember, even though it may be a sad moment, but it's still uplifting. It doesn't have to, thinking the other day, it doesn't have to be all about sadness. It doesn't have to all be about tears. Grief is individual, but it's also strength. It's building that strength within ourselves to understand on that higher level, and on a level outside of our control, that the lives that people have lived and the lives that people have left behind, they still matter, and they still have a place in our life. And as long as we carry that and remember that, then their life meant something to not just me, but to everyone that they were touched by. So there are some questions that I'm going to read and then I'll respond to. And I think I answered some of it in regards to how does helping elders help my spirit at the same time. And again, it's reciprocity. When we give, we also receive. And it's not anything in a tangible sense, but it's on that emotional, mental, and spiritual aspect that that we are helped as well. And being able to walk the talk, I guess that's what it would be, in that you do things out of the kindness of your heart. And it's something that, as I started out with, it's something that I learned, I observed. And helping elders is such a precious time, because they're elders and their time is limited. And I know one of the things that runs through my mind now as I'm getting up there is that I couldn't wait to be an adult. I couldn't wait to be older. But I think it's important for us to to be in the present, because you'll get there. But you know what? As time passes, we lose people, and we need to cherish those moments that we have with them, and not look for the profound nature of things, but those moments of just being in the same time and spaces with them, and then contributing to their well-being, their safety, their care. The second question is, how does helping elders increase our knowledge of tradition and connection to language? Again, like having those moments to spend with them, and I would have dinners with elders and faith keepers and chiefs and clan mothers and family members who can speak the language, and it was an opportunity for them and me to sit back and listen, but for them to create that space of language. And again, that was uplifting their spirit and the laughter. I was very fortunate and grateful that they'd throw me a bone of a word that I could understand, so I could get the gist of the conversation and laugh along with them. And again, that's how learning is. We can do it in an educational setting, we could do it in a formal setting, but those moments, like I said, when I was growing up, my great-grandmother, she lived to be 96. She could speak English, but she never spoke English to me, and she would never respond to me if I spoke in English to her. So that connection, again, the language in itself gives you a different way of seeing and understanding the world. It's more of a connective aspect, and that this is not just a you thing, this is a we thing. We are going to do this. My grandmother never said, you go do this. It was, this is what we are going to do today. And I never heard you do this. It was like, we're going to do this. Language, again, is a different way. And again, the science behind that, when you know more than one language, you're creating more connections in the brain and creating the opportunities for a stronger, more profound thinking. And I would tell young kids in school, when I would go in and do presentations about health and well-being, mental health, about the language, because even today, speaking your language is not seen as a great thing from people who don't speak. That you're strengthening your brain to be smarter, and that you're going to be able to think in more abstract ways and creative ways. And I would say that, but yet I didn't apply it to myself until people would ask me, how did you come up with that? And I would be like, what? Like, what do you mean? Like, I thought it was just common understanding, common knowledge, but again, I forgot to apply that to myself. Is there any traditional story connected to language, and what is it? Well, that question is a loaded question. And when I like, for me, again, when I talked about the language being a way of thinking, being, and knowing, that's the context that I think of. And there's the colonial impact aspect of that, but I always go back to essence. And each nationality, ethnicity, tribe, nation has their own language. And that language it's about communication and fulfilling our responsibilities in our practices, our cultural practices, our cultural understandings. It's not something that we can say it's so that this will happen. It's about, as a people, the way that we have that connection with our higher power. And whatever we have in our heart, that's language as well. It doesn't have to be spoken, but it's more or less felt, and the intention is put out there. Another question, what have the elders said to help you overcome challenges? I don't know that it necessarily said, but showed me, taught me in working together, and created that space, that safe space for me to be vulnerable. So it's more of a not a saying thing, but a doing thing. And then explaining teachings or history, sharing experiences is what helped in being able to have those conversations about what were you thinking and what were you feeling in that experience. And sometimes it was, well, how long does it last? Well, that's different. Everybody's different. And how did you overcome it? And then going back to the values of like how we treat one another also goes back to how do we treat ourselves. And that internal dialogue that we have, like that ganiko hio. Are you being honest with yourself and what you're thinking, what you're saying, what you're feeling, and what you're doing with yourself? And are you providing that ganakwashra, that deep care and respect for yourself? And then that get down, that compassion. Are you being so helpful and kind to yourself? And if you are, being able to be utilizing ganiko hio, that good mind, ganakwashra, that deep care and respect, and get down, that kindness and compassion with yourself, then you're using kasha deshra. You're using the strength of your mind to do the right thing for yourself. And it always has to start here, because what we have here, we have to give to other people in moments of happiness and joy and peace and contentment, but also in challenging times. We have to give that to other people. And being able to see that and experience that, observe that, and have those discussions, that's how they help me. Yeah, like I said, it was a living, why do I miss speaking to elders in the language? The hardest part, well, I miss it because of the emotional joy that they had in speaking the language, because they lived through that time of when it wasn't okay, it wasn't safe, it wasn't respected to speak your language. And they had gone through that and lived through that and contributed to revitalization, maintaining that language. And that was a aspect of their identity that was resilient, maintaining their resilience and their connection to creation and to Saguayan Diso. That's what I miss with language and the elders, is because of that strong connection. And then the language that I grew up with and understanding and having more ease with is Cayuga. My mother-in-law, Aima, she taught me, and then I was still learning, is Mohawk. Mohawk was hard, even though that's what my nation is Kanyekehaga. And I was a Mohawk speaking Cayuga, but I'm okay with that. That's again, I can understand, I can read them both and speak them both from reading. I'm still learning. What can I say to uplift youth? And what can youth do to connect to their elders if they are not here? Connecting with elders, an elder to me is not physically in their 80s and 60s and whatnot. An elder is somebody who can and does live according to the values within our Ongwehome Neha, our way of life. And an elder, for me, even some of my elders are in high school. Some of them are, my nephew is still in grade school. Louisa Nahawi, he's one of my elders, and we hang out a lot, and he knows the language. He's very fluent. His mom and dad raised their children in the language and teachings and ceremony, and he's like 12 years old, and he's an elder. And you don't have to be old to be an elder. And I used to have a lot of elders that I could go to, but even our young ones, we can teach them and talk to them, and being able to, we have to find the ones that are open in sharing what it is that they know, and hearing the conversations and hearing their answers. So again, I don't have a textbook definition of an elder. The knowledge is there when you're listening. It's there, and it doesn't matter how old they are. My work with young people in the job that I do, what have they taught me about life and overcoming hardship? Young people are the most pliable, adaptable, flexible, hit the road running, resilient people. Their willingness to figure things out is what I see in them. Like, we have a lot of youth in the cities that come to program, and they're so open-minded and eager to learn and to understand and contribute to the world around them. And I think the hard part for them is because they're young, we're not fulfilling our responsibilities as adults to give them that chance, to believe in them. And that was one of the biggest things of overcoming hardship that for me I learned, is that When we have somebody who believes in us, especially when we don't believe in ourselves, that helps us overcome hardship, because we need that. We need that grounding. And that's what people have to offer us, is that grounding, that safety, that sacred space. Sacred space doesn't have to look like this. Sacred space is ganikohio, ganokosha, gadaunsha. That is sacred space. And honoring them with our time and our listening to them, and helping them and encouraging them and supporting them and helping them, really looking at them and seeing the strengths that they have. They know when they're being placated, so you can't just whip it off. You got to get to know them. You got to hear them. You got to pay that respect and be honest with them. And so as things open up and we begin to visit, is there anything elders are asking for? Your time, your respect, your kindness, your honor. That's what they're needing. They're not going to ask you for it. They're not going to expect it from you. But it's something that they're needing, is that ganikohio, ganakosha, get down. You using gasha deshra, the strength of your mind to do the right thing. When you offer, they're probably going to say no. But you offer by already going there with what you want to help with. I know with my aunts and my mom, and I would say, this is what I'm going to do. Or I did this for you. So again, it's being present, offering what you have to give within a values of being ungwahonwe. What life lessons and knowledge do I hope to pass on to your children and grandchildren? I'm very fortunate that I've been doing that, and my grandkids and my children, they show me that what I've shown them and shared with them of being a helpful person, being honest, being a contributing member within our family, within our community, within our society. You don't have to have these big, grand platforms, but you have your part to play. You have your moment, and I see it. Like, I remember when my 3-year-old daughter was telling me that I have to be nice to people. I was kind of angry at her dad. And she's like, you can't talk to my people like that. And my dad is my people. And you can't talk to him like that either. And it's like, wow. I thought I was ready for this girl, but she's keeping me on my toes. And again, that's seeing them, hearing them, and respecting them. And knowing that, well, I wasn't the only one who contributed to it. She had my aunt who helped looked after her when I'd go to work, when she went into daycare, the staff, the eventually becoming our friends, and her other mothers. We raised this girl, and she still has her other mothers in her life. But yeah, I am passing on that knowledge, but more so living it with them and showing it to them and doing the we thing. We are going to do this. this is an us. This is a you and me, them. It's all of us. It's always about doing things for other people and helping them and each other. It's not perfect, but it works. So I guess experiences, teachings that have passed to you that you would like to pass. I answered that one. Again, it's sharing what I've learned. And again, like looking at this stuff here, the medicines and that, like I was in the berry patch as a child, eventually working in the berry patch, learning how to work as a young person. I didn't like it, but I liked having $30 as an 8-year-old and spending $30 a week on as much candy as I could handle. But the way that I pass things on is by doing things. My children were working when they were young. My daughter was a berry picker. My sons were landscapers. My grandchildren are berry pickers. They're like, I'm pretty sure we're in 7 generations now of berry pickers in our family, probably more. But it's that way of life, different things, little things, canning food, having stuff put away, teaching them how to do it, them having their part in it. Again, so it's sharing the things that I learned and talking about them. This is how I learned it. This is what I learned. This is the experiences that we've had. This is medicine tied to our who we are. It's food, it's sustenance, but it's also medicine. So in closing, I would like to encourage people to seek out as many across the spectrum of 8-year-olds to 90-year-olds of elders. Again, listening with your heart and having those conversations. There's always something to learn from somebody, learn every day. And not feeling inadequate about things that you just learn. Funny story, I just learned that a foot is not actually a foot in measurement. So my younger cousins, we were during the 10 days of my aunt's funeral process, and she said something about licorice because we had a junk food day, and she said licorice was like, have I ever seen the foot-long licorice? And I'm like, yeah, well, what size is this? So I grabbed the bag and I held it down for her foot, and I put it by there. I said, oh, that looks like it's about 1.5 feet. She's like, my foot is not 12 inches long. And I'm like, well then, I'm this day old when I learned that a foot, an actual foot, is not a measurement of 12 inches. But I guess that it's about being humble, that you're not the expert. Everybody around us has a piece to contribute to what we're going to end up with, understanding and knowing and being when our time here is done. So that's my parting words. I want to thank you for your time, and I'm so grateful to be here. Yawa, onagiwahe.